This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We now have a full week of data on every single team in the NFL, and some of that data is pretty impactful for projecting player roles for player props. Our job today is to dig into that week one data, outline the biggest takeaways, and try to find value in the week two slate by talking to Aidan Cotter of FanDuel Research and seeing which bets he likes at FanDuel Sportsbook. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research. Joined here as mentioned by Aidan Cotter. You can find him on Twitter at AidanCotterFD. He is on Blue Sky at Aidan Cotter as well. Check him out at FanDuel.com/research. Doing a lot of work for us over there, including our weekly start sit column. Aidan, happy week two. How you doing today?
Doing great, Jim. I'm excited to move on from week one. There were some fun games, but for some of us, not as fun as for others. But no, it was a fun week. I'm glad we have some data to actually sift through and look at and get rolling into week two.
I hate to break it to you. I might be rooting for more pain for you in week two because I laid the 4.5 with the Detroit Lions as they take on your Chicago Bears. It's out to 6.5, so I feel good about that. So maybe they can cover the 6.5 so we can get like something for you, but I can win my 4.5. There's a 2-point middle in there we can feel good about at least, right?
Yeah.
Is a cover a moral victory for you?
I don't know if the cover quite does it for me. I won't lie, but yeah, this is definitely a good number. I will say I'm kind of on the Lions in DFS this week, so I might be right there with you.
Yep, I need some Laporta, need some Gibbs, need some JMO. We're not going to talk about the others on that team, but I think that I'll need those guys for sure in DFS. Today, we're going to break down Aidan's read on what we should take away from week one, which data matters from week one. We'll dive into some fluid situations, yardage props he likes, a touchdown bet Aidan is eyeing, and his favorite same-game parlay at FanDuel Sportsbook as well. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. Our week two game-by-game breakdown is already up. Riley Thomas joined me, breaking down his thoughts on the three biggest games across the week two slate. Got some bets from Riley there. Also talked college football week three with Ben Stevens. Pretty fun slate there too. Both those shows up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Go there, hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. Of course, these shows do go on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, along with our NFL DFS breakdown every single week with myself and Brandon Gadula. FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. Subscribe there. 6 shows per week there. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you hear over on the YouTube side of things. FanDuel is getting you ready for kickoff with an offer you won't want to miss. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet. Bet $5, and if it wins, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. You can build parlays, bet player props, ride the live lines, whatever your style, FanDuel has you covered. The NFL season is finally here. The only question is, are you ready to play? Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Health Oregon, Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050. For 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Aidan, we do have data on all 32 teams from week one, but it's important to know which of that data matters. So to you, which data we saw from week one is most important when you're trying to identify value in the player prop market for week number two?
Yeah, Jim, earlier in the season, I feel like the biggest thing that I want to be looking at within the prop market is just utilization. And so not really just targets and like raw volume, receptions, rush attempts, pass attempts. I kind of think that's secondary earlier in the year. I mean, that's stuff we want to definitely be keeping in mind, especially if a player is getting a ton of targets and not capitalizing on those. But for me, really early on, I'm really looking at like route participation and snap shares. That tends to be, for me, the stuff that I feel like the is more on the coach's side. And then for me, it's about targeting the talented players that are getting that run that haven't necessarily panned out in terms of raw output quite yet. So really looking at like, who are we expecting to be the primary receivers on this team? Who is getting a lot of routes in the early game, early in the season, and trying to see where we can find value within the sportsbook from that utilization.
Yeah, and the key thing is that everyone played different teams in week number 1, which means that they could have played a tough team, and a player's output might not have been very good, but that could have been not a proper reflection of their role. They could have played an 89% snap rate, 85% snap rate, and not gotten a lot of work due to play volume, due to game script, stuff like that. But if they're on the field, that's how you rack up things that get you player props on FanDuel. The rushing plus receiving yardage gets you receptions, things like that. It's hard to do those when you're not on the field. And that's why, to me, you mentioned snap rate. That's going to be the key thing for me. Route rate, especially for tight ends. A guy like Brock Bowers may not play every snap, but if he's going to run every route, basically, for that team, that's going to matter a lot too. So it's kind of digging into those rate stats, those indications of, okay, this team wanted this player on the field. That should lead to production long term. So I agree that like snap rate and route rate are going to be the two most important pieces of data from week 1.
Yeah, and I think too, like as important as those rate stats are, I also think even just looking at like raw snap totals and raw route totals, I think especially if we're also looking at the team context. So our colleague Brandon Gadula does an adjusted pace piece every week, and that tends to be pretty sticky, especially even early in the season. And so not just those rate stats, but then also like if you're getting a 60, 70% snap rate, that's good. But if you're doing that on a team that's running 50, 60 plays a game, that's a lot better than someone who might be getting a 70 or 80% snap rate, but they're on a slower pace team where they're not getting as many just raw plays. So trying to balance those two things, I think, is really important.
And unfortunately, that pace data that stabilizes quickly was all really slow in week 1, much to my chagrin. Now, there were some surprising teams in week number 1 as far as how they utilized different players. And it can be important to dig into those teams and identify, can we get in before the market fully reacts to what we saw in week 1? Which of the teams do you think could present the best value in the prop market, whether it's a buy low spot or to buy a player before the lines get to a higher situation later in the year?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot to take in from week 1, and I feel like every time I look at the data, I find some new wrinkle or some new interesting thing from the early in the season. But in terms of a potential buy low spot or just a buy spot in general, I was like kind of interested in Kellen Moore's New Orleans Saints.
Yeah.
And that feels kind of gross because coming into the season, I was really not on this team. I don't have much exposure to them in fantasy or anything season long like that, but they were kind of frisky in week 1. Spencer Rattler like wasn't terrible, which I think is like better than we can say from last season. And in this Kellen Moore offense, we saw them run 67 plays, which was 8th in the league. But then when you adjust, you see that they led the league in adjusted pace early in the season. And that's something we've tended to see with these Kellen Moore offenses where they do like to run a lot of plays and he likes to get up and down and he's not afraid to throw the ball. I mean, Spencer Rattler attempted like 45 passes in week 1. Like you're not going to get that with every team. And especially in terms of the prop market, most of their utilization was like pretty concentrated to 3 guys, at least in the passing game. Looking at Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, and Rashid Shaheed. And like those 3 guys, I do think are buys like in fantasy, or especially we don't have props up right now because the 49ers are dealing with a lot of injuries. But when those go up, those are definitely going to be 3 players I'm eyeing, especially in like those more usagey stats. Like Rattler only got to like a little over 200 yards despite his 45 attempts, but like those usage numbers, looking at reception totals, that is something I'm really interested in early in the season, and I want to see how the prop market is going to react to that heading into week 2.
Yeah, as you said, no props up yet. I do want to see the outside receivers, specifically Shaheed and Olave, given that Juwan Johnson going to deal with Fred Warner in this game, and Fred Warner is he just drags down all tight ends at all times. And so that worries me there. But Juwan Johnson's usage, frankly, could not have been better for a tight end in week one. So you could still potentially justify him if the market does wind up being pretty low. But Olave and Shaheed, definitely guys who do interest me for this week 2 slate. Okay, Aidan, let's look at some spots where props are posted right now. Where are you seeing value in the yardage markets for week number 2?
I really did not want to do this, Jim. I had every intention of avoiding this Bears-Lions game, so we just didn't have to talk about it, didn't have to think about week 1. But, man, the more I look at these early prop markets, the more I just keep coming back to Caleb Williams against the Lions. And, listen, I'm like one of the biggest Caleb truthers you're going to find. But, like, even through that lens, I don't think I can really, with good conscience, recommend any of his passing-related props.
Sure.
I mean, we're early in this Ben Johnson system, and after they got out of that, like, initial script early in the first quarter, it was not pretty. But my goodness, this dude made some just amazing, I think that's fair to say, plays with his legs.
Sure.
I mean, he had 58 rushing yards on just 6 attempts, all of which were scrambles. And he was kind of like scooting around out there. I mean, he was responsible for 2 of the 18 runs that reached 20 miles per hour, according to Next Gen Stats. He was the only player to do that twice in week 1. And then you pull up, PFF has a missed tackles forced statistic. And my golly, there's Caleb Williams tied for the league with 5 missed tackles forced after week 1. And like, okay, he didn't see a single design run. And we don't really have a track record of Ben Johnson with rushing quarterbacks because he was responsible. He was with Jared Goff, who we like Jared Goff, but not really going to get out and run. But I think clearly scrambling is going to have to be a part of this offense. PFF had Caleb at 20 pressure dropbacks in week 1. That was the most in the league. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Ben Johnson, who's supposed to be one of the better offensive minds in the sport, sees how effective he was in week 1 and wants to draw something up for him, either designed or just getting him out of the pocket and moving, anticipating that pressure. And this is a big game for Ben Johnson. Obviously, it's returning to his former team. He knows this Lions team, even if they are obviously different, losing both coordinators. But I think that also means that he probably knows that the Lions gave up the highest rushing success rate to quarterbacks in 2024. And they were near the top of the league in blitz rate last season. They were right there again in week 1. And like, they didn't get a ton of pressures against the Packers, but Packers have a pretty good offensive line. And in general, like, that game did not go the way I think they wanted it to. And like I said, last year, they did blitz at a high rate, just like they did earlier in the season. And Caleb played them twice, obviously, as division opponents, and he had 4 scrambles in both of those games. He went for 34 and 39 rushing yards in those 2 games. And this weekend, his over-under is at 28.5. I do think, because we're just looking at like 1 yard difference, it is worth it to me to like look into like his alt market. I believe 30 plus is like minus 106. That is really intriguing to me, considering he has gone for at least 30 rushing yards in 10 of his 18 career games. And so I do think this is a nice spot, especially if, like you had said, we're anticipating the Bears to be trailing. Their run game did not really produce anything as far as like DeAndre Swift or Kyle Monangai in week 1. I don't see them having a ton of success on the ground via the running back in week 2. And if they're facing this negative script, he's getting pressured a lot. Like, I think we saw in week 1, he's not afraid to use his legs. And that is really something I want to buy into, when the usage and what you see on film and on TV is reflected in the data. Like, we see how effective Caleb was on the ground. And given the potential game script the Bears could be facing, I think this 30 plus line is pretty friendly at minus 106 odds.
Well, you think back to last year, there was that stretch after they made the change with Waldron at offensive coordinator and Thomas Brown is calling plays. There was a stretch where Caleb started to run a bit more, and it seemed like that did help the offense. Like, if you're looking for a bright spot for Caleb Williams as a rookie, it kind of came when he was a bit friskier with his legs toward the second half of last year. And Ben Johnson's not stupid. Ben Johnson realizes the advantages an offense has when a quarterback is willing to run. And if the rest of the offense is struggling, why not tap into that a bit? You know, I feel like it's a lever they can pull, and I feel like right now they are incentivized to do so.
Yeah, and I think especially like Roschon Johnson's he's I believe he practiced at a limited capacity early this week, but like if he can't go and we're still just looking at Swift and Monungai, like I said, I don't know how they're going to run the ball with their running backs. And so I do think, like you said, like Ben Johnson's not stupid. He knows that they can't just drop back and throw 50, 60 times a game. And so I think incorporating, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a few design rushes, but again, like even just getting him out in space where he can like make those plays with his legs as he sees fit, I think is something I'm willing to bet on.
All right, so Aidan is on the Caleb Williams rushing prop. That is 30 plus yards, minus 106 over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Let's shift focus now and talk about some touchdowns. When you look at the anytime touchdown market at FanDuel Sportsbook, Aidan, which bets stand out to you there?
I want to come on here and like have some like really cool plus 200, like real nice value here. And then Jalen Hurts is minus 115 to score again this week. And like, I can't stay away from that. I can't deny that. I mean, frankly, I'm kind of surprised to see him at this number, considering he scored 2 rushing touchdowns last week and neither of them were tush pushes. Like both of them were just raw scrambles, which is like not something we've seen a ton from Hurts around the red zone in recent years. And so like, if he's going to be incorporating that into his game, in addition to, we know they can still tush push, like he is arguably the most effective rusher from within a yard or two. And obviously we know how the Super Bowl shook out. I think Kansas City, I would expect them to give a little more push in this game, but it's got a pretty friendly total. We've seen Hurts have success in the past against this Chiefs team. And like, yes, the Eagles have Saquon Barkley now, and you see his anytime touchdown score odds are a lot shorter than Jalen's, but that hasn't really impacted his ability to run or at least to score. Like he's played 20 career games now with Saquon Barkley, including the playoffs, and he scored in 13 of them. Like at minus 115 for somebody who is this dangerous and close, like I do think that's pretty intriguing. And again, with a guy like him, multiple touchdowns are definitely on the table. And so like, this is something where I wouldn't be afraid to in a bigger matchup in a game that I think the Eagles would want to win, I would assume, like, and that we've seen them have success with in the past, like looking into potentially putting a smaller amount of my bankroll on like a 2+ touchdown wager, I think is also pretty interesting.
I think the 2+ touchdown wager is always in play when it comes to Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, the two like predominant tush push quarterbacks in the league. You mentioned the Saquon Barkley factor with Hurts. Last year, he still had 51% of their rushing touchdowns in games that he played. Like he had more than half, even though Saquon Barkley was busting off these long plays. The year before that, it was 68%. So I kind of entered the year thinking there was potential for Hurts's like touchdown rate to actually increase from where it was. And we kind of saw that in week 1 because we didn't have the 75-yard Saquon Barkley touchdown. Hurts to score twice, plus 550 at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think that does make a lot of sense as well. So Aidan is on Jalen Hurts, 2+ touchdowns, potentially a bit of plus 550, but the predominant one here being anytime touchdown at minus 115. All right, Aidan, I'm open up the board for you. I'm going to give you a same game parlay to build at FanDuel Sportsbook for week number 2. Which game you go into and which legs do you want in that SGP?
All right, Jim, we're going to be looking at this Colts-Broncos game, which despite being in Indianapolis is a 4:05 Eastern start, which is a little interesting. I'm sure they'll have the roof open for that and the sun will not be an issue at all. I obviously, like I kind of talked about earlier, we don't want to overreact to just 1 week of games. Like we saw that with the Saints last year where they looked like the best team in the NFL after 2 weeks. And then obviously we know how that panned out. But man, the Colts were impressive last week. And I know the Dolphins stink and the vibes are bad, but like I've always been a big Shane Steichen believer. Like Matt Harmon from Yahoo calls it the Minshew minimum, where like if you give Shane Steichen someone who is like literally just Gardner Minshew level of a quarterback, like he's going to produce, he's going to win games. And like even last year when they were splitting between Flacco and Richardson, they still won 8 games. Like there's only 2 less than the Broncos. And when you look, the Colts were like, they had a winning record at home last year, whereas the Broncos had a losing record on the road. The Broncos did not look good last week. Like I think the Titans are better than people think, but like the offense in particular did not look good. So I think opening this up and building the same game parlay around Colts money line at home, getting that at plus 102 odds, I think is really a fun way to start this. And so if we're under the assumption that the Colts are going to win this game outright, somebody's got to score for them. Last week, it was Daniel Jones twice on the ground. I can't quite get there. It's definitely interesting at plus 250, but I do think we are getting a shorter number at minus 140. And like, I wouldn't love to just bet this outright at these odds, but when you're pairing this with the Colts money line, I think it makes a lot of sense. Taylor was second in the league in red zone rush attempts last week. He saw 7 and did not score a touchdown. He was like second or third in Brandon Goodell's expected touchdown model. And like, it's Jonathan Taylor. Like, getting him at minus 140, I think is interesting, especially if we're under the assumption the Colts are going to win. Colts are going to be running the ball. To round this out, I want to go into the passing props market. And this is where I'm targeting an under for Bo Nix at 228.5. Like, I've never been a huge Bo Nix guy. I know you liked him coming out and your model liked him a lot. And obviously
my model liked him. He proves a lot of people. My model liked him.
He proves everyone wrong in the first season. But 228.5, I do think is like a little rich for a guy who averaged less than 200 yards to the air in road games last season. Like, he was not nearly as good on the road. And you see that a lot with younger quarterbacks. Like, he only went over 228 yards in 3 of his 10 road games last year. And I think when you look at the improvements and the additions that the Colts made on defense, finally getting rid of Gus Bradley, like, I don't think they're going to have like as much success as they had against whatever the Dolphins were trying to do on offense last week. But it's not like the Broncos were really lighting things up last week either. I mean, Bo Nix was under this mark last week, despite attempting like over 40 passes. I believe it was like, it would have been like the 3rd or 4th pass attempts that he attempted last year. And so with an improved defense on the road, like, I think if we're under the assumption the Colts are going to win this game, I think part of that is because the defense shows up and holds Bo Nix under this passing total.
Also, you have the fact that Sean Payton came out after last week's game and said, hey, we got to run the football more. And they've got 2 guys who are talented enough to do that. They've got a very good offensive line that can do that. So that does bode well for a Bo Nix under as well. So the 3-leg same game parlay for Aidan is going to be the Colts money line, Jonathan Taylor to score, and Bo Nix under 228.5 passing yards. That grades out at plus 371 at FanDuel Sportsbook. And they do mesh well together here, where maybe it's a bit of a lower scoring game where it's not a chaotic negative game script for the Broncos to force them to throw it a bunch. I think that could make a lot of sense. So plus 371, not bad odds, given I think that, like you said, did see a little bit of shakiness from Denver in that opener, despite the win against Tennessee.
Yeah. And like, for me, this is like more just buying into the Colts than it is like trying to fade the Broncos, because I do like the Broncos. Like, Bo Nix has looked good. He had a good rookie season, but I think this Colts defense might be like, it might take people a couple weeks to really understand and like realize like, oh, this isn't just like the soft, like cover 3 Gus Bradley defense anymore. Like, this is a legit unit who has like real players out there.
Yeah, Louis Anarumo kind of seemed like he needed a change of scenery by the end of time in Cincinnati. He got that here, did some fun stuff in week 1. Obviously, again, the caveat of the Dolphins, but did look better for sure. Okay, so Aidan is on again. JT to score, Colts money line, and Bo Nix under 228.5 at plus 371. That is all that we have here for today and this week on Covering the Spread. Big thank you once again to Aidan Cotter for joining us for today. Check out Aidan on X at AidanCotterFD. He is on Blue Sky at Aidan Cotter as well. Aidan, appreciate the time as always. Good luck to you in week 2. I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Good luck to all your bets except for the Lions one this week.
Again, you can, if the Bears can play well, as long as they lose by 5 or more, we can all be happy. Again, check out Aidan's work at FanDuel Research. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. I am on Threads at Jim.Sannes, and you can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work in the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your week 2 bets. We'll talk to you once again next week. Doubleheader on Monday Night Football. Break that down on Monday. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.